The grand chamber of the galactic Concord hummed with the murmurs of 100 different species. Towering reptilian varlins whispered in deep, guttural tones. The sleek, crystalline Cytherians hovered above the polished floor, their light-based bodies pulsing in unreadable patterns. At the heart of the circular hall, a holographic display flickered, showcasing the vast reaches of known space. High Chancellor Orvindral, a battle-scarred Kasari, wrapped his clawed fingers against a curved table, signaling for order. The chamber quieted. "The situation is critical," he began, his voice reverberating through the hall. "The Drazen swarm advances unchecked. They have already consumed the Jerva Dominion and the Oris Commonwealth. We must act before they breach the core sectors." A low ripple of agreement passed through the assembly, but there was no confidence in it. The Drazen were an ancient terror, a tide of biomechanical warships driven by hunger alone. None who faced them had survived. Ambassador Zorvin felt as the Cytherians floated forward. "The Concord fleet has been routed in every engagement. We cannot match the Drazen in numbers or brute force." Another voice interjected, a deep, rumbling tone belonging to Commander Reth Valos of the Varlon Legion. "Then we fight like predators, not prey. Strike where they are weakest." A silence followed. They all knew the truth. There was no weak point in the Drazen advance. Then, from the outer circle of the chamber, a voice cut through the heavy air. "You forget the stories." Heads turned toward Garlon Vesh, a gaunt Zalaria historian with sunken eyes and air of quiet intensity. His people were known for their obsession with the past, and for that, the Concord largely ignored them. But something in his tone made even the hardened generals pause. "The Drazen are relentless," Vesh continued, stepping toward the central display. "But there was once a force that stopped them, a force the Concord has chosen to forget." High Chancellor Drawl sighed, his patience visibly thinning. "We do not have time for myths, historian." "They were not myths," Vesh countered, his voice rising. With a flick of his clawed fingers, the holographic display shifted. A new image replaced the war-torn maps, a fleet of dark, angular warships, a design not seen in over 1,000 years. "The humans," Vesh said simply. A murmur spread through the chamber. Some scoffed. Others stiffened at the name, as if it carried a weight beyond mere legend. "Extinct," spat Commander Valos. "Burned themselves out in their own wars. And good riddance." Vesh's eyes gleamed. "Are they?" He tapped the display, zooming in on a distant sector. Over the past 3 cycles, uncharted systems along the outer rim have gone dark. Patrols sent to investigate never returned. And 3 standard weeks ago, we intercepted a transmission, one that does not match any known Concord frequency. He played the recording. At first, only static filled the chamber. Then, a single distorted voice, cold-clipped, unmistakably alien to Concord's ears. "They're coming!" The room fell deathly silent. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the High Chancellor's hardened features. "Who sent this?" Drawl demanded. Vesh leaned forward. "That," he said, "is the question that should terrify us." Chancellor Drawl exchanged glances with his counselors. The idea was absurd. Humanity was an ancient ghost, a cautionary tale of a species that had burned too hot, too fast, and vanished. But if they were wrong, if even a fragment of that old power remained, "Enough speculation," snapped Zorvenfell. "We need real solutions, not old war stories." A decision was made. A fleet would be sent to investigate the Dark Zone, a show of force, to confirm what they all already knew. The humans were long gone, weren't they? As the Concord fleet slipped into hyperspace, the dead system they approached remained silent, drifting on the edge of the void. And in the darkness, something watched. The Concord Expeditionary Fleet emerged from hyperspace into a system without a name. No planets, no moons, only the shattered remains of what once might have been celestial bodies. The void here felt heavier, as if something vast and unseen pressed against reality itself. Admiral Zarek Fowl sat rigid in his command chair aboard the Vanguard Ascendant, his dark exoskeleton gleaming under the dim bridge lights. A veteran of 100 battles, he had learned to trust the instinct that now curled like ice in his gut. Something was wrong here. "Report," he ordered. "Reading significant debris," said Lieutenant Varen, his bioluminescent fronds shifting anxiously. "Wreckage from multiple vessels. Composition is," he hesitated, double-checking his instruments, "unlike anything in the Concord database." Zyrek narrowed his eyes. Visual feed. The holographic display flickered to life. The wreckage drifted in slow, haunting silence. Some ships were jagged and insectoid, Drazen unmistakably. But others— "By the void," whispered Varen. Amid the field of ruin lay ships of an entirely different make. Dark, angular, with hull plating that swallowed light rather than reflected it. No insignias. No markings. They were alien, yet eerily familiar. Zyrek clenched his mandibles. He had seen old war records, the grainy, long-buried footage that no one liked to discuss. "Confirm the metallurgy," he said, though he already knew what the answer would be. A tense pause. Then, "It matches the pre-collapse human warships," Varen said. A chill rippled through the bridge. Zyrek forced his voice to remain steady. "Any energy signatures?" "Negative," replied the center officer. "No active systems. These ships have been dead for a longer pause. Unknown. Possibly centuries. But what?" The officer swallowed. "Some of them don't look like they were destroyed in battle. They were open, Admiral, from the inside." A ripple of unease passed through the bridge crew. "Life signs?" "None," came the hesitant reply. Zyrek exhaled slowly. "Launch recon probes. I want full scans of that wreckage." As the probe streaked toward the debris field, something changed. A soft, rhythmic ping echoed across the bridge, faint, distant. A distress signal. Origin. Varen checked his console. "It's coming from one of the human vessels. A small one, possibly a frigate class." Zyrek hesitated only a moment. "Bring us within optimal range. Maintain shields at full." The Vanguard Ascendant crept forward, the void stretching endlessly around them. The derelict human ship loomed ahead, blackened and scarred, but somehow intact. The distress signal continued, repeating the same fragmented phrase. Then the signal stopped. A single breath of silence. Then the comms officer's voice shaken. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission." Zyrek turned sharply. "From where?" The officer's mandibles clicked. "From nowhere, sir. It's just here." Before he could demand clarification, the bridge speakers crackled to life. A voice spoke. Cold, measured, unmistakably human. "You should have stayed away." The Vanguard Ascendant's lights flickered. The ship's automated defenses surged to life unbidden. The fleet's sensors screamed with alarms. Then the darkness around them moved. Silent shapes emerged from the void, dozens of them. Warships, massive, angular, black as the abyss, gliding without sound or flare. Their hulls bore no lights, no emissions. They had not been there moments ago. And yet, they had always been there, watching, waiting. The bridge erupted into chaos. Unknown vessels, impossibly close. How did they? No hyperspace signatures detected. Zyrek's pulse hammered, but he forced himself to remain still. Do not, repeat, do not power weapons. Hold formation. The unknown fleet did not move closer. They simply existed, an unspoken threat given form. A second transmission followed. This time, the voice was sharper, edged with something dangerously close to amusement. "We are not your enemies." A pause. Then, yet, Zyrek felt the weight of 1,000 old stories pressing in on him. The humans were real. They were here, and they had been watching far longer than anyone had imagined. His next words were barely above a whisper. By the stars! And then, just as suddenly as they had come, the human warships vanished into the dark. The Concord High Council was in crisis. Admiral Zyrek Fowl's transmission had spread like wildfire across the core worlds. The humans, long dismissed as myth, cautionary tales whispered to fledgling civilizations, were real, and worse, they had returned. The council chamber was a storm of voices. "This is an existential threat," roared Ambassador Cardhall, his gelatinous form undulating with barely restrained panic. They eradicated themselves once before. Who's to say they won't drag us down with them? "Are we certain it was them?" asked strategist Mevrajow, though her six-clawed fingers trembled against the podium. Could it be a surviving faction, an imitation? High Chancellor Orvin Drawl silenced them with a raised hand. His yellow eyes burned with something beyond fear, calculation. "They did not fire on the expeditionary fleet," Drawl said. "That was not an act of war." "No," Zyrek agreed, standing before the council, his mandibles tightening. "It was a message, a demonstration." The chamber fell silent. It was Garlon Vesh, the Zalari historian, who finally spoke. He had been silent through the deliberations, watching, waiting. Now he exhaled, his voice quiet but sure. "Their silence was an answer in itself," he said. "They are not concerned with us. They have another purpose." Drawl's gaze sharpened. "And what purpose is that?" Vesh's spindly fingers danced across his holopad, bringing up a new display, one that made the chamber shudder. The Drazen swarm, advancing faster than ever before. System after system, falling like dominoes. 2 major Concord fleets had already been obliterated, and yet a single front in the war had gone dark. No Drazen movement, no transmissions, nothing. "Their core supply lines have been severed," Vesh said. "Not by us, and not by accident." Zyrek inhaled sharply. He had suspected as much, but seeing it laid bare sent ice through his veins. "They're hunting them," he murmured. Drawl rose from his seat. "Then the enemy of our enemy is—" "Not our friend," Zyrek interrupted, shaking his head. "They made that clear." The silence deepened. Then the emergency sirens blared. A communication officer sprinted into the chamber, breathless. "A Drazen armada has breached the last defensive line. The core worlds are their next target." Panic erupted. They were out of time. The Concord had thrown everything they had at the swarm, and still it had not been enough. Drawl exhaled. His voice, when it came, was grim. "Ready every ship," he commanded. "We make our final stand." The Battle of Orion's Veil. The Concord's last fleet assembled in the Orion's Veil system, the last stronghold before the core worlds. Thousands of ships, a patchwork of species and designs, all standing against the coming tide. Admiral Zyrek stood on the bridge of the Vanguard Ascendant, watching as the Drazen swarm emerged from a void. An endless tide of living warships, chitinous and black, blotting out the stars. There was no ceremony. The Drazen attacked. The first wave hit like a hammer. Concord ships buckled and burned, their weapons struggling to stem the flood. Screams filled the comm channels. The defensive lines collapsed in minutes. Zyrek bared his fangs. They would die here. And then the humans arrived, like wraiths from forgotten nightmares. Their fleet materialized from the void, engines burning like dying stars. They did not announce themselves. No war cries, no transmissions. They simply opened fire. Their weapons did not behave like those of the Concord. Their cannons did not fire energy blasts, but something heavier, faster. Mass drivers punching through Drazen warforms as if they were made of paper. Electromagnetic lances lacerated the swarm in precise, surgical strikes. And their ships, void black monoliths, moving with an eerie grace, did not break formation. They did not falter. They carved through the enemy like a scalpel through flesh. The Drazen, who had never known fear, began to hesitate. Zyrek watched, stunned, as an entire sector of the battlefield was purged in minutes. For the first time in history, the swarm retreated. On the main view screen, a transmission flickered through. A single human warship had sent a message, a voice calm, unwavering. "Male, your war is irrelevant." A pause. "We are here to end it." And then, with chilling precision, the human fleet turned away, vanishing into the void once more, leaving only wreckage in their wake. Zyrek's claws dug into his armrest. They had won the battle. But the humans had made one thing very, very clear. They did not fight for the Concord. They fought for reasons entirely their own. The aftermath of the Battle of Orion's Veil left the galaxy in stunned silence. The Concord had survived, but barely. Their fleet was in ruins. The Drazen swarm had been halted, but not by their strength. The humans, silent, unknown, terrifying, had struck down the tide and vanished into the dark, leaving no explanation, no demands. Admiral Zyrek Fowl stood alone in the war room aboard the Vanguard Ascendant, watching tactical readouts update in real time. The Drazen advance had stalled across multiple fronts. Wherever the humans had appeared, entire enemy strongholds had been erased, but no one knew why, or if they were next. A hushed tone broke the silence behind him. "Admiral." Zyrek turned. Garlon Vesh stood there, the Zalaria historian who had first dared to speak the name of ghosts. He looked weary, his sunken eyes shadowed by something more than exhaustion. "You were right," Zyrek muttered. "They were never gone." Vesh exhaled, stepping closer. "The Concord believes the humans are allies now." "They aren't." "No," Vesh agreed. "They aren't." He tapped his holopad, displaying fragments of intercepted transmissions, encrypted signals, human in origin, scattered across the galactic void. "After every battle, they do not occupy. They do not claim resources. They simply disappear," Vesh said, "but their movements follow a pattern." Zyrek studied the data. A creeping realization settled into his bones. "They aren't just hunting the Drazen," he murmured. "They're studying them." Vesh nodded grimly. The humans never fought wars for conquest. They fought to win. And if they have returned after all this time, it is because they have decided something worse is coming. Zyrek felt the weight of the words settle over him. A species that had once ruled the battlefield, who had chosen exile, had now returned, not to rule, not to reclaim, but to prepare for something the rest of the galaxy could not even fathom. A proximity alert blared across the ship. Zyrek turned sharply as a priority transmission forced itself onto the command display. Not from Concord space. Not from any known system. The humans had sent a message. One sentence. "You are not ready." Zyrek's breath caught. And then, without warning, the void shifted. A tear in space, blacker than the abyss, yawned open on the edge of the system. Not hyperspace. Not human. Something else. Something watching. Something waiting. And for the first time in 1,000 years, humanity had returned. Not as conquerors. Not as saviors. But as the only ones who knew what was coming next. The end, for now,